Thank you so much, Claire, for that really generous, thoughtful introduction. Thank you. Thank you to Pearl for inviting me to Ottawa. My second time reading in Ottawa. The last time I read here was about 4 years ago. No, 7 years ago, actually, 7. And I'm just really happy to be back. Thank you also to Jean and all the other folks at Tree Reading Series who seem to be doing a fabulous job. And then also thank you so much, Jennifer, and all the open micers for your work. I'm just grateful to be here. The vibe in the room is so good. I was like, I have to dedicate a poem to these people. I'm only supposed to be reading stories. That's what I told myself, but I'm just going to ask my last book, School, what poem I should read for you all. All right, so the universe said no book walk, and I dedicate this to you. You moved across the country to live in my studio. You are my twin. We have access to all these schools and all these empty classrooms. Something your phone stuttered, but I don't text at breakfast. And that's how I spent last summer, lonely. My relations used our meetings as opportunities to drink. My thoughts rusted like old coins in a living fountain, just to get coherent, to give up our feelings for these machines. The women of Denver were so generous. At a party, one gave me a silver ring. Another time, an acquaintance slipped me her shoes and walked home barefoot. I have no idea who is a woman and who isn't, and no interest in pursuing the question. We're all mothers, and we're all death. And at 18, we had fake IDs, decisions made out of fear and snow. The lying is in us still. I don't know when it went walking and when it returned. So this is my very first reading from this book. It just came from the press on Friday. So you're my first audience other than my empty apartment and my girlfriend listened to half a story accidentally. So thank you for hearing these stories. And I'm going to read 3 really short ones from this book called Hider Seeker. I'm going to begin with the first one. It's called The Charlatan. We were in Canada, but that didn't mean anything. At the next table, I heard them telling stories. Fucking faggot. Fag couldn't even throw the ball. Raucous laughter. They must have said the word 5, 7 times. I kissed my girlfriend on the mouth and headed to the gender-inclusive washroom. As hot air blasted my hands dry, I thought about saying something to them. I decided not to. Then I was standing in front of their table. 2 young women with half-shaved heads and piercings sipped pints of amber beer. A bearded dude in a trucker cap emblazoned with East Van Baseball League had his arm around one of them. They looked like any other East Van hipsters, looked like they'd have fairly decent politics. Closest to me, a guy with stringy long hair attacked his steak with a fork and knife. Across from him, a brawny man with a shaved head devoured a hamburger. They were all talking loudly, but I recognized 2 of the voices. They belonged to the 2 men closest to me. "Excuse me," I said. I was just sitting at the next table with my girlfriend, and we couldn't help it overhear. I mean, I heard some language. I was stumbling. I mean, do any of you identify as queer? It came out more awkwardly than I had hoped, but then I had not intended to have this conversation. I looked around the table. The 2 women looked stricken or stunned. I wasn't sure which. No one spoke, and then the bald man looked at me with bloodshot eyes. "Fuck off," he said loudly. "Fuck off and leave me alone. I'm trying to eat my dinner." He lifted his hamburger. Grease from the burger ran down his hands. His stringy-haired companion chimed in. We were just talking about our friend. He can't throw. It didn't mean anything. He was wearing a Make America Great Again t-shirt, which I'd originally thought was ironic. Now, I wasn't so sure. It's just, I'm queer, I said. And it's really jarring to sit here and hear that kind of language. Fuck off, the bald man said again. I'm trying to eat my dinner. I don't care. Leave me alone. The place was called the Charlatan. It was one, I guess. Posing as a cool cafe on a street of free thinkers, artists, and queers, but also home to people like this. It's a free country, Stringy continued, still clutching knife and fork as he itched his chin with his wrist. We were just talking about our friend. It's a free country. We can say what we want. The trucker cap guy and the two hipster women hadn't said a thing. I couldn't tell if they were mortified or indifferent. Behind me, my girlfriend hovered. She had her hand on my elbow as if she was prepared to yank me out the door if it got more violent. I hear you, I said to Stringy. But the thing is, I'm sitting right next to you, and we're sharing this space, so it's public space. And just as I wouldn't use language that would offend you, I would hope, leave us alone, the bald one barked. He had set down his dripping burger and clutched his pint in his meaty hand. Just fuck off. We don't care. And that was it. My girlfriend tugged at my arm, and we were outside in the wind with the swirling leaves, the baggy-panted Rastas talking on the corner, the warrior mothers pushing strollers. We walked past cafes where green-haired queers hunched over laptops and old Portuguese men sipped espressos in corners crammed with fake marble statues. We were still in Canada, I reminded myself, digging my hands deep into my coat pockets. My girlfriend wrapped her arm around my shoulder and kissed my cold cheek. As we walked, I tried to look at each stranger's face as if I knew them. Thank you. This next one's quite different. It's called Insomnia. Insomnia. She was born one day out of the shadows of my closet. She lived there for months, and then she moved in with me. She started working at the cafe where I took my coffee each morning. She wore bright blue nail polish and black lipstick, and licking her lips told every customer she was pregnant. She ignored me and only served my coffee when it was cold. After her shift, she would follow me home and collapse in my bed, snoring, her red hair billowing like theater curtains. I started to sleep on the couch. One morning, I woke up to her giving me a tattoo on my foot with a sharpened chopstick and ink from a discarded ink cartridge she'd found in my garbage. The tattoo was a startling likeness of her face. She worked diligently until it was done. Her stomach grew. It was a hysterical pregnancy, but very convincing to her and to everyone else. She told everyone at the cafe the baby was mine. They always looked surprised, but then quickly covered it up. They didn't understand my gender and had no idea what my genitals were capable of. I'm down to one coffee a day. My brain just isn't working the same way, she told a regular, an opera singer in a green muumuu. She licked her lips. Green, my favorite color, money and jealousy. But the woman turned away in disgust. Insomnia's flirting skills were abominable. Even I couldn't be seduced by her, though she slept in my bed every night. 9 months passed, and Insomnia's stomach kept getting bigger. She sold sheets from my bed to sew herself an elaborate pregnancy dress that looked like a bridal gown, complete with a train. She started telling customers at the cafe that we were getting married. At this time, she would only eat sushi from one particular neighborhood shop, and she had given up coffee completely. Her stomach grew and grew. She started calling herself the mansion. No mere house could hold her. She had also decided her baby was a girl, claiming the ultrasound showed a certain body part particular to that category of human. Insomnia's ideas of what a girl was were very strange. Girls were terrors and beauties. Girls should shave their heads at 18. Girls often killed small creatures and painted their faces and arms with blood. Girls shouldn't be given coffee before the age of 21. Girls were builders, first and foremost. Girls should never have babies. She bought a huge pink stuffed elephant and slept with it in my bed. Afternoons after work, she would flop on the couch, leaving the elephant to doze in my room. I had nowhere to sleep. She ignored me, cooked elaborate meals, meaty pastas, nutty salads, fragrant orange curries, and ate them all on my kitchen table while I rested, hungry, on a camping mat on the kitchen floor. The customers and neighbors started to become suspicious. It had been a year since she first announced that she was pregnant. Her stomach was still growing. 3 months late, they'd ask, "Have you seen a doctor?" She would airily brush aside their concerns. "You know how doctors are. Another latte?" Soon, the cafe owner wanted to fire her. Her freakishness was bad for business. Her outfits, sewn from my curtains, tablecloths, and pillowcases, became more and more outrageous. Deep cleavage, eye holes to show her belly button, skirts tight on her thighs and slid up the leg. Her flirting had gotten even more aggressive, her makeup more garish. She smelled like cottage cheese and old rose water. Everyone was either bored of her or scared of her. After being fired, insomnia came back to my apartment, back to my bed, and slept. She slept all day, and she slept all night, for many days and for many nights. At first, I tried to comfort her. I brought her chamomile tea and apples, a little bit of chocolate to brighten her face, but she would just turn her head away. After a week, I let her be, hoping she would rouse herself without my interference. But several more days passed in unbearable silence, the bedroom door resolutely closed. When I put my ear to the door, I couldn't hear any movement. Finally, I knocked softly, and when there was no reply, I crept into the room. There she was, insomnia, naked on her back, the covers thrown aside. I could tell immediately that she had not moved in some time. I stepped closer. Her eyelids were smeared with ancient mascara. Her stomach had deflated like an old balloon and flopped sadly to one side. Her strong odor had diminished, leaving just a trace of milk and roses. Even her velvety red hair had dulled. I didn't have to hold a mirror in front of her mouth to see that she was not breathing. In death, she looked shrunken and green. Outside the window, dark clouds raced, and as I watched, the shadows gathering in the room started to slide across her face and arms. Her birth shadows, come to take her home again. I bent over and picked her up. The afternoon was darkening rapidly as I climbed into the closet with insomnia in my arms. And then the last short that I'm going to read tonight is a sort of fable, and it's also quite short. It's called The Sisters and the Ash. When the mother slipped to ghost, there's 3 sisters were left with her rings and her teapot and her hairbrushes full of long gray hair. They were left with a gray house, stained walls, and a very drunk father, his belt and his rage. The mother had not known how to protect him, and then she became too weak to leave her bed. But the sisters were smart, each one smarter than the last, and they learned how to protect themselves. While on a camping trip in the mountains, the eldest met an old but agile crone who lived in a cave. From the crone, she learned an obscure martial art that she quickly mastered and taught to her sisters. Each sister slept with a beautifully jeweled knife, a surprising parting gift from the mother, tucked under her pillow. One night, the father came into the youngest sister's room to massage her feet. She struck him so hard in the chest that he fell backward. From the floor, he saw her knife glittering above him like a menacing star. After that, the father began to live in earnest fear. He took up the anxious habits of one afraid, smoking, pacing. His old addictions, yelling, beating, and drinking, were no longer allowed. He dared not smoke in the house after his middle daughter's strident lecture on secondhand cancer. He cowered in the corners of the rooms, covering his words with coughs. The sisters pretended that he wasn't there, and indeed, he became nearly invisible to them, just a light mildew dusting the baseboards, fading to gray-green mist. One day, the eldest sister entered the living room carrying a soapy sponge and a bucket, and the father retreated to the garage to hide among the rusty car parts and old sports magazines. Chain smoking, he leafed through swimsuit issues, looking at breasts and thighs, the hint of a carefully shaved mound. But even the youngest bodies were like dead wood to him. Nothing plucked his imagination. A lead-stomached grief filled him where once had been virile rage. In his absence, the house became cheery. The sisters washed all the walls and painted them bright cherry, sassy turquoise, I caught a canary yellow. The father's ratty furniture and smelly clothes made a heavenly bonfire when burned with sticks of fragrant incense. There were loud and late parties, stomping dances, music of horn and saxophone and trumpet, each sister emptying her lungs into song. It was as if their father had never been born, had never lived. Years passed. The sisters took lovers and let them go, deepened friendships, learned trades, grew an abundant garden. The middle sister became a brother. The youngest had a child they collectively raised. They had long forgotten the father when one day the youngest sister went out to mow the lawn and noticed a ghost ship, the garage, sagging at the edge of their property. She thought it would make a nice art studio for the child. The door was bolted from inside. She had to kick it open. Dust upon dust. She could barely see for all the motes stirred up in the air. At the back of the garage, she saw a shrunken figure balanced between a bench and a work table. She stepped closer. Under a thick layer of dust was a skeleton, barely held together by the thin paper of its dried skin. Between two fingers, a cigarette, a long fingernail of ash at its tip. The daughter blew softly and watched as her father crumbled to dust.